Hey everybody, this is Dan Deppen for PLO8poker.com, and in this video I'm going to be playing some brush poker, but the purpose of the video is to talk about starting hand requirements and what positions we can play different hands and relative hand strengths and that sort of thing. I'm going to be assuming that most of the people watching this video are relatively new to PLO8, and so I'll be talking about some of the basics and how starting hand values differ from other big bet games like No Limit Hold'em and Pot Limit Omaha. Obviously, they're going to vary quite a bit from Hold'em. And as most people know, the hand values in PLO8 run very close together, much more so even than Pot Limit Omaha. But that doesn't mean that we can't get edges pre-flop, and it doesn't mean that it certainly does not mean that we can just go ahead and play every single hand. Position is going to be super important, probably at least as important as it is in Pot Limit Omaha, and I would say probably more important than it is in something like No Limit Hold'em. So the main reason here behind playing rush poker is just so that we can see a lot of hands. So middle cards are always bad in this game, so we got a bunch of 8s and a 9, and also the fact that we're holding a pair, a small pair like that, really hurts our hand there, so that's going to be a quick muck. Ace Ace Deuce with a suit is obviously about as good as it gets, and we're definitely going to be playing that. A lot of times when I open from under the gun, I have a tendency to min raise, and I do that with most of my under the gun opening range, so I'll do that with my super strong hands as well as the weak ones. Although I definitely, while my under the gun range is going to be very, very tight, it's not going to be just restricted to the Ace Ace hands. That's what people expect me to have, so that actually makes it a little bit more difficult to play a hand like that, even though it's very, very strong. And later on, if it comes up, I'll get into some other hands that we might be able to mix in from early position. So from the blinds, we're always going to want to play very, very tight. In a hand like this, if we're any hands we are going to play from the blinds, we're going to make sure to have some ability to make the nuts, because usually when we're playing out of the blinds, we're obviously from the small blind, we're always going to be out of position, and a lot of times the pot's going to be multi-way, and so hands that make marginal lows or marginal 9-high flushes just don't have any value. And you don't want to be tempted by the fact that it's only potentially a very small amount of money to call, because the hand just isn't going to be playable and is going to tend to get you in a lot of trouble. So obviously this hand is very, very strong, but from the small blind being out of position the whole way, I don't really want to blow the pot out of position. I'd rather keep the pot small pre-flop and see what we can hit before I decide to inflate the pot. And here we do have a backdoor nut low draw with counterfeit protection, but we're still on the flop there. We're drawing the running low cards, which is not good for half the pot, so we would have definitely been folding to any bet there on the flop. And on the turn, we're just kind of hoping it checks around again so we can make our nut low. And that works out, which is nice, and so we'll just make kind of a pot sweetener since we're still only getting half the pot, and there is some chance we could be getting 3/4 if another ace deuce shows up. But given the way that's played out, it's not super likely. Here's another hand that's really, really junky, so we can make a fire 3 for a low that's hardly ever going to make the nuts. And a jack-high flush draw with, when we're holding 3 of the hearts, is really not going to be very good either. So here we're on the button. Now I'm going to be playing a lot of buttons, probably up to 40% or so. And this ISO here is fairly, it's marginal to say the least. I'd say folding that on the button is definitely fine. But given that this is rush poker, the blinds are going to tend to be pretty tight. And so a lot of times we're going to be able to ISO heads up. And we hit a flop here that's really good with the board pairing. So I'm going to bet again, because I think a lot of times if he has a 5, we'll hear from him on the flop. A lot of his hand consists of flush draws. Of course, now at this point, we I'm going to fire one more because I think he would have stuck in his last bit there if he had something. Let me see if I can. Obviously a super premium hand here. Junkfisher is a really good reg. So we get the chance to 4-bet, and now we can just stick stacks in. Although that's really not a good flop for us. And I'm not going to be really happy if we get called. But in that situation where you have the opportunity to 4-bet, and then you leave about a pot-sized bet left for the flop, it's generally going to be profitable with a premium hand like ace-ace-deuce to just go ahead and 4-bet and then shove any flop. Except for the very scariest ones. And that was one that we definitely missed. We have a suited ace here. We have 3 low cards, but really we're not going to be making any kind of nut low. And the odds on hitting the nut flush are relatively low, so it's okay to pitch that one. Aggressive players will go ahead and play that at times. More junky cards here from the big blind. Just kind of waiting for somebody to bet so we can pitch it. Back on the blind here again. Pair of jacks, very weak, generally speaking, in PLO8, but we do have the 2 low cards to go with it. Now here's one where, on the other hand, there was 1 limper and we ISO'd with a relatively weak hand. Here we don't want to ISO because we had 2 limpers. One of the things in PLO8 is that people will very, very rarely limp fold. Usually if people limp, they're going to be calling. So in this situation, we're probably going to be having a 3-way pot at least if we raise there. And our hand really isn't the kind of hand we want to play a 3-way pot with. It's the kind of hand that makes Jack, Jack, Deuce 3 is a hand that makes something decent in both directions, but not really nutty in both directions. And so in those situations, you really want to be heads up in position. Multi-way is much it's going to be much more difficult to play. So that's why we just limped in instead of ISOing. Another strong hand we can play under the gun, and I'll just do my normal min raising from under the gun. So ace-5, which is not really much of a low, but we do have a big pair in our hand, which is not real strong, but it's something we want to play. We don't mind playing a small pot with it. It's kind of deceptive because if we do hit this a lot of times, if we end up making top set, it's not a hand that our opponents expect us to show up with a whole bunch. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here. I will have more on the way. In the meantime, go ahead and please visit www.PLO8poker.com, where I've got more videos posted on there, and also some strategy articles, more information on PLO8. And that's where you can also buy my book, Pot Limit Omaha 8 Revealed. I have the expanded edition, which just came out, just coming out recently. And so please go ahead and check that out, and I will see you next time.